I never believed in monsters, not because I thought they didn't exist, because I thought, if something like that ever did exist, someone would have found proof by now. A photo, a body, something. I don't think that anymore. About 2 years ago, I moved into a small house surrounded by woods. It wasn't isolated. The nearest town was only 15 minutes away. But once the sun went down, the trees made it feel much farther. I liked that. After years of apartment buildings, traffic, and people, the silence was almost relaxing. The first strange thing happened 3 mornings after I moved in. I opened my back door and found a deer antler lying on the welcome mat. Just one. No blood, no footprints, nothing. I picked it up, walked into the woods behind the house, and tossed it as far as I could. I figured an animal had dragged it there. It wasn't worth thinking about. The next morning, there was a large black feather on the mat. Long, almost glossy. I'd never seen a bird feather that size before. Again, no tracks. No sign of anything. I threw it away. This time, I checked around the yard. Nothing. The fence was untouched. The gate was locked. The ground was soft enough to leave footprints. There weren't any. Not even mine from the night before. The third morning, there was nothing. I actually laughed. Finally. I remember saying it out loud. Whatever had been happening was over. Or so I thought. That night, I woke up thirsty. The clock on the microwave read 1:18. I walked into the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and happened to look toward the window. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. There was a hand resting against the outside of the glass. Not tapping, not scratching, just resting there. The fingers were too long, far too long. Thin, almost jointed in the wrong places. They weren't claws.
But they weren't human fingers either.
For a second, my brain refused to process it. I just stood there, holding the glass, looking at that hand. Then, it slowly slid downward, out of sight. I dropped the glass. By the time I reached the window, there was nothing outside, just darkness, and the trees, moving in the wind. The next morning, I convinced myself I hadn't seen anything. Lack of sleep, moving stress, my imagination. People explained strange things away all the time. I wasn't any different, until I walked outside. The flower bed beneath the kitchen window was covered in mud. Not footprints, handprints. 5 long fingers pressed into the dirt, one after another, as if whatever had stood outside my window hadn't walked away. It had crawled. Using only its hands, I took pictures, measured them, even searched online for animals that left unusual tracks. Nothing came close. The closest result was a forum where people argued over fake monster photos. I closed the page, deleted the pictures, and told myself I was done thinking about it. That decision lasted exactly one night. The following evening, I didn't sleep much. Every sound outside made me look toward the kitchen, tree branches, the wind. A raccoon knocking over a trash can somewhere in the distance. By midnight, I felt ridiculous. I was letting one strange night get inside my head. So, I came up with a plan. The next morning, I drove into town and bought 3 security cameras. One for the backyard, one facing the kitchen window, one above the back door. If something came back, I'd finally have proof. The cameras recorded all night. When I woke up, everything looked normal. No antlers, no feathers, no handprints. I almost felt disappointed. I carried my coffee to the kitchen table, opened the security app, and started watching the recordings. The backyard camera showed exactly what I expected. Nothing. Trees moving. Rain for a few minutes. Then nothing again. The camera above the back door also showed nothing. No movement. No animals. No people. Then I opened the camera facing the kitchen window. At first, it looked just as empty. The backyard, the trees, the reflection of my own kitchen. I almost closed the video. Then something caught my eye. Not outside, inside. At 1:17, I walked into the kitchen holding a glass, exactly as I remembered. I filled it with water, stopped, looked toward the window, dropped the glass, ran forward. Everything matched my memory, except right before I rushed toward the window. Something moved behind me, not outside, inside the house. A shadow crossing the hallway, slowly, quietly. I paused the video, zoomed in. The image became blurry, too blurry to make out a face. But I could clearly see one thing. An arm, long enough that it almost touched the floor. I watched that 10-second clip at least 20 times. Every time, I noticed something new. Every time, I wished I hadn't. That afternoon, I checked every room in the house. Closets, the attic, the crawl space beneath the stairs. Nothing. Every door was locked. Every window was shut. There was nowhere. Anything could have hidden, at least. Nowhere I could find. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, all the lights on, the security app open on my phone. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Around 3 in the morning, I finally convinced myself I'd imagined the shadow. Then, something brushed against the outside of the window. Not a bang, not a scratch. More like Someone slowly dragging the back of their hand across the glass. I looked up. Nothing. The yard was empty. I grabbed a flashlight, stepped onto the back porch. The air was completely still. No wind. No animals. Just silence. I swept the flashlight across the yard. The trees, the fence, the flower bed. Nothing. As I turned to go back inside, my flashlight landed on the kitchen window. For a split second, I saw my own reflection. Then, another one, standing directly behind me. I spun around. There was nobody there. When I looked back at the window, only my reflection remained. I locked every door in the house, checked every window twice, then sat in the living room until sunrise. When daylight finally came, I almost laughed at myself. Fear does strange things when you're exhausted. That's what I kept telling myself. Until I opened the back door. The welcome mat was empty. The flower bed was untouched, but taped neatly. To the outside of the kitchen window was the same black feather I'd thrown away days earlier, and beneath it, 5 long streaks of dried mud, exactly where those fingers had rested. That was the morning. I decided to leave the house. I just didn't realize. It was already too late. I packed a few bags that afternoon. The plan was simple. Stay in a hotel for a few nights. Call a realtor. Sell the house. Forget the whole place ever existed. By sunset, I was gone. I didn't even look back. 3 weeks later, I signed the papers for a small apartment in the city. 9th floor. No backyard. No trees. No kitchen window facing the woods. Exactly what I wanted. Neighbors, traffic, street lights, people. I slept better that first night than I had in weeks. For the first time, I thought it was finally over. The following morning, I opened my apartment door to leave for work. The hallway was empty, perfectly quiet. I smiled, closed the door behind me, locked it, then turned toward the elevator. Something stopped me. A single black feather, lying neatly on the floor outside the elevator doors. I froze. It looked identical to the one I'd thrown away. I stared at it for several seconds, then forced myself to keep walking. Someone probably dropped it. That was all. It had to be. I worked late that evening. By the time I got home, I'd almost convinced myself it meant nothing. I unlocked my apartment, stepped inside, locked the door, then noticed something on the kitchen counter. Mud. 5 long streaks, side by side, not smeared, pressed down, exactly the way fingers leave marks when someone rests a hand on a surface. I hadn't touched mud all day. Nobody else had a key. I cleaned the counter, checked every room, every closet. Under the bed, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. The apartment was empty for the next several nights. Nothing happened. No feathers, no mud, no sounds. Slowly, I relaxed. Maybe someone had broken in. Maybe I'd carried the mud inside without noticing. Every explanation sounded better than the one I refused to consider. A week later, I woke up just before dawn, not because of a noise, because something felt wrong. The apartment was silent, too silent. I walked into the hallway. Every light was off except one, the small light above the front door. I don't remember turning it on. As I reached for the switch, I noticed the peephole. Someone was standing outside. I couldn't see a face, only darkness. I stepped closer, looked through the glass. The hallway was empty. I frowned, pulled back, then looked again. Still empty. I almost laughed, until something slowly entered the edge of the peephole. 5 long fingers, curving around the outside of my door. One at a time. They didn't knock. They didn't scratch. They simply wrapped themselves around the edge of the frame. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just watched. The fingers remained there for what felt like forever. Then, they slowly disappeared. I never opened the door. Not that morning. Not after the police arrived. Not while they searched the hallway. They found nothing. No mud. No fingerprints. No feathers. Nothing. I still live in that apartment. I never look through the peephole anymore. If someone knocks, I wait until they're gone. Maybe there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything that happened. Maybe stress can make people see impossible things. I'd like to believe that. I really would. But sometimes, when someone knocks at my door, I remember those fingers. And I wonder how long they were there before I decided to look. Thanks for watching. Sleep well.